get up and howl about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my roll top niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day prepping America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclosed with holes at the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit bitch, if not better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas and get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money brought your great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya, I own every gold mine in South Africa. Thanks, baby, you made me $1 billion. Plus, I own a building for each one of my children's children.
Welcome to UCY.TV for Voice of Rebellion with Chris J. Tonight on UCY, Chris is talking about Hugo Chavez and commemorating the life of him. So with that, hey, welcome, Chris. Welcome to back.
Hey, man. Hey, everybody, we're live here, Voice of Rebellion Radio, UCY Radio. This is Chris J. March 6, 2016 today, and like Vince was saying, we are doing a show right now commemorating Hugo Chavez, a very South American leader, anti-imperialist leader of Venezuela from 1998. He was elected up to his untimely death in March 5th, 2013. That's why we're doing the show today. Is that yesterday was the 3-year anniversary, and even though it's been a full 3 years, and he's still very closely remembered in the Venezuelan South American communities for good reason. And I see a lot of hate about him in the truth movement, and a lot of good stuff in the truth movement. People that have wisened up and realized that there was a lot of lies put out there by the mainstream media. I think that Coach Chavez will forever be remembered as a strong anti-imperialist leader that prevented his country from falling into the United States again after the United States had lost their grip, and the West had lost their grip on Venezuela in 1998 when he was elected. Went back to the times in the 90s or 2002. People kind of forget now. It's been almost 14 years. But on April 12th, 2002, there was a coup against Hugo Chavez, and he was actually temporarily displaced from power. And the United States almost took back the country and tried to put in billionaire oligarch Pedro Carmona, who's going to be the Venezuelan president. Legally, the people didn't want it, but they were going to be forced to by the interior parts of some people in the Venezuelan military who made the coup possible. But ultimately, the people that organized it were the CIA and the United States, and also, according to the Venezuelan government intel, apparently Spain also had some involvement in the United States, probably had the majority of the involvement of the coup, like they did in Chile in 1973, when they did a coup to overthrow popular leader Salvador Allende and put in fascist dictator Augustus Pinochet, who we know now is responsible for somewhere around 100,000 deaths in Chile, were disappeared in black vans for years, all the way up to 91, and he was around very recently, until 06, until he finally died. He was in exile, I guess, for 15 years. He wasn't even in exile. He died in Chile. I know he went in exile to Britain for a while, but then when the atmosphere kind of cooled off of the, someone forgot about the crimes he did, I guess he came back to Chile where he died. That was really the same way for Pedro Carmona. He's never returned back after trying to stage the coup. He left in 2002 and went to Colombia and then returned since then. A lot of the other coup plotters, they ended up running to Miami and other part into the United States, a lot of them. Some of them are in jail currently in Venezuela, and some are about to actually be given amnesty, possibly. With that, now the right wing has taken back they have to have a supermajority, a legal supermajority, that they rigged at least 3 of the seats they took illegally, and now they have a supermajority because of those 3 seats that they took. And now there's a high possibility that they'll amnesty these criminals that resulted in many of the deaths of the Venezuelans on this 2-3 days during the April 2002 coup, where it was not only an attempt on the democracy and the will of the people of Venezuela, but it was also an attempt on many people's lives and the actual taking of many people's lives by violence, by right-wing gangs shooting people in the streets and manipulation of the media. They tried to make it seem like the left wing were shooting them unprovoked, but they were causing a provocation, and they were even killing their own people and blaming it on the other side. It's definitely there's definitely a problem in Venezuela and has been ever since that the fascist government of Carlos Andrés Perez and that legacy, I guess, that he left behind. Ever since, there's still some of his followers, some of the people in the same mindset of these people that are still enslaved to the mentality that he is and his government was the best that Venezuela had or whatever. So also under Perez was a brutal dictator, but still there's still remainders of his supporters again still on the streets. And that Venezuela's had a problem with right-wing terrorism, probably the worst in any of all the countries in South America with right-wing terrorism, maybe like Colombia, which their terrorism problem is enabled by the Colombian government who pays the paramilitaries and death squads in Colombia. So there's a lot of the same paramilitaries cross over into Venezuela, causing terrorist actions to be done in Venezuela, such as targeting buses with passengers on them, bombings and other attacks. It's similar to what the Andrés Perez government did, was to support the United States back in the 80s and 90s, especially during the Carazaco, where he used terrorism against his own people to, literally definition of terrorism, used acts of terror to govern, to put a political agenda, and he everybody in line, at least till the mid-90s. And Andrés Perez, during the Carazaco, he starved the people. He had gangs pretty much. His military started killing people indiscriminately, pretty much, and just another act of terror is keep people terrified. I think there was, lots of tear gas and they shot all the protesters. I mean, there was the estimate, what I've seen recently, looks more like 3,000 died in months in February and March of 89, which now it's been over 25 years since the Carazaco. But it's one of the worst events in South American history. And the same people that are right now protesting Maduro and calling for the end of the Chavinista Bolivarian revolution, are trying to take power now, that are now in the parliament, they belong to the same party. They are even they belong to the same mindset. These people that did horrible acts against Venezuelans for 70s, the 80s, and the 90s was not so support. And they're the same people that I see on, in the movement even, people supporting these thugs, supporting these criminals, supporting these narco-traffickers, supporting these brutalizers, not realizing what they're responsible for in the 80s and 90s. There are people starving, there are people living in slums. People talk about the food shortages they have now, which is still a problem, unfortunately, due to international sanctions against Venezuela and a lot of looting from Colombians that are opportunistic, and they buy everything at the super low prices that are offered in Venezuela because they're subsidized by the people's government of Caracas. And they come over there and then they bring it across. And that's why the border has been shut down for the last few months, is because it went out of hand. People talk about, only Venezuela milk gets smuggled. No, it's not because of the Venezuelan situation is why this is happening. It's not Venezuela smuggling because they need Colombia being, from my country, greedy people from my country, crossing over to Venezuela, taking their stuff at the low price, being opportunistic, bringing it back across the border and selling it at the American standard prices that they have in Colombia. And in Colombia, the prices are almost at the same level that you'd find here in the United States. While in Venezuela, it's literally 10 times cheaper. Oil, for example, is 15 cents a gallon, I believe. That's at 25 cents a gallon, and it went up a little bit recently, which they smuggle to Colombia. Right now in Colombia, that same gallon is $4. It's actually double what Americans pay for gasoline. You can imagine the kind of profit that people are making. You make 20. You pay for example, you pay 10 gallons, you get $2.50. Spend $2.50 for 10 gallons. You bring it over to Colombia, sell that same $2.50 for $40. You just made $37.50 profit. And then you do that 100 times. Bring a quick quantity 100 times more than that. You made $3,750 for one truckload of gasoline. So you can see why there's all this, why this happens, why there's these shortages, because there's so many people that are opportunistic and so many people down in Colombia that are taking advantage of this easy loophole out in Venezuela, on the border cities mainly. Colombia, they have a way worse problem than in Venezuela. In Colombia, they have a 29% abstract poverty and well over 50% poverty. They have children under the age of 5 sometimes die of malnutrition, just like in the days of the Andres president. Government in Colombia as well, they have serious problems with prostitution. Even if it's legal, the sad thing is it's the only route. A lot of these women, they don't have any education, they never went to school, and they don't have any skills, I guess, because they come from very country villages, and then they get feeded into the prostitution in the major cities, where they often become rented out for sex tourism to British and American tourists. They don't realize what kind of, this is not slutty, middle class American chicks that are doing the prostitution there. These are a lot of these women have been forced into it. And the thing is that it's all going the same way here in the United States. The ultimate prostitution is just a very dirty ring that's ran by criminals usually, and those women don't do it by choice. It's funny when feminists support prostitution when prostitution usually is almost completely relied on by exploitation of women involved, and the people who own it reaping all the profits. In Venezuela, there's no problem with prostitution, as people are not forced to fend for themselves, and people will say, well, this is the government has caused a bunch of dependent, lazy welfare dependents. No, this country, Venezuelan government is now ran by the people. It has been where the people have make economic decisions. Now they actually directly use government officials to make economic decisions. They have a lot more say. There's way more direct democracy, and they vote every position practically in Venezuela that really affects the people's lives. And ultimately, the people, people talk about they say, oh, it became a food police. And I see this lovely article from naturalnews.com, which I used to think was a credible source or whatever, until I saw that there were another Venezuelan bashing alternative media source, and I realized that there might not be the best source. So they said a police state based on biometric scanning. It doesn't sound so Orwellian, and it might actually happen here in the United States. But in Venezuela, what ultimately happened, I'll explain exactly what happened, is now that you have to get a special ID card that is issued out. It's not even a big deal to get it. It's pretty much like having to show your driver's license at the grocery store to prove that you are an American citizen, or there to prove you're a Venezuelan citizen, so you can actually take the profits. I mean, it's not much harder than having to get a driver's license, is what it looks like. And then you catch it, that way, and then you show it, and then you can pay for your food at this very low subsidized price. So that's only the Venezuelan government stores, as from what I understand, is you have to show that. For example, you can go to a private store. They're explained this way, most of the United States, we have a food chain, Kroger's. You know, there's Kroger's that's still there in Venezuela. You can go to Kroger's, and there's no showing the ID or anything, but you're going to pay, 3 times the price down at the, Venco or whatever. Venezuela, or well, it's
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know what the name of what they call these stores. It's probably just it's like Misión Boliviano, Bolivian Mission store, the local store, and you go in there, and you have to show your ID, but you get 3 times cheaper prices because these are being subsidized by the Venezuelan government. The big chain stores is part of the reason why they're having the food shortages, because they're being prioritized international shipments than the Venezuelan government. And they're pushing a squeeze on the Venezuelan government, because a lot of the private food chains, they want the Venezuelan government to fall so they can be back into having a monopoly over the food, and because they're kind of, now they don't have nearly the same amount of business. Poor people aren't forced to scrap all their money to just feed themselves at these stores. They can go to the cheaper Venezuelan government store and pay for their prices. And ultimately, people will say, well, this money is coming from the Venezuelan people, and they're just getting it back. Ultimately, and this is, classic statism or whatever. And I'll tell you one thing: the people that this Venezuelan government stores are being funded by, this is oil tycoons. They lost out now, the Exxon, Shell, whatever, and the billionaires. They're still probably, the Venezuelan government sees a lot of their funds from, are still helping pay for these stores in Venezuela. These people were pushed to the ultimate statism, where they helped the poor. They were in bed with a state that killed protesters in the streets. They were the ultimate corruption. It was like, if you weren't in bed with the government, you were screwed. That right there, and then they deserve to get their money taken away from them. And I mean, these were giant corporations. I'll just have to say that they weren't regular people. Money that's being forced to pay for the lower class, like people, often complain here in the United States that they're middle class, the few that remain or whatever, the people that are even quite the middle class, the upper working class will complain that their money is going to the lower working class. The truth is their money is going to the super rich corporate welfare. And there in Venezuela, the majority of the taxes are not paid for by the middle class that's now coming up in Venezuela. They're being paid by the corporations that still operate in Venezuela, or the ones that have been now disbanded and their assets were seized for corrupt practices that they did under the Andres Perez government, and things, and were also responsible for crimes against humanity during the Carlos Andres Perez government. These corporations that were directly responsible helping the Carlos Andres Perez government are now, of course, paying for the Bolivian missions. Bolivian missions, yes, because actually Hugo Chavez made these programs, which were just to help increase the quality of life in Venezuela. These initiated, and they were far-reaching to reach many different aspects of Venezuelan society that were wrong, and also to many different people in Venezuela. So furthest people on the furthest mountains were now being paid or being helped by these Bolivian missions, and the Bolivian missions. There was lots of problems that were tackled. The Bolivian missions, they tackled illiteracy, they tackled food shortages, they tackled education, people not being well undereducated, people that never even got through the 3rd grade and stuff like that because they couldn't afford it. Health care, the major one, where you could still, in Venezuela, they have free health care now, not paid for by Joe Schmo. Everybody complains. They say, Joe Schmo shouldn't have to pay for your neighbor's health care or whatever. But these are giant corporations that are now paying for the people's health care. And a lot of these people probably busted their asses at these corporations trying to live now have health problems because of it. Well, guess what? Now the big corporations are being forced to pay the bills of those regular people. There's also this tackled the water problem also in Venezuela. You know, it's funny. It's funny because I'll tell you a little story here. Is that, you know, that a lot of the rich people, I think there's like this rumor apparently in Venezuela that they cut off the water at times to certain people. And I think it mainly targets at times the super rich people. So I joke around and will say, you know, there's probably some super rich people are probably joking, or I'll joke around with these super rich. They're complaining about, oh man, my jacuzzi water's not going to hot water's not going to my jacuzzi anymore. Oh no, I can't get water for my margarita machine. Oh no, my water for my fake lake where my boat is not going. You know, they're probably complaining about those stupid problems, you know, that they compared to the stuff they inflicted on the Venezuelan people over the years, the super elite class. And then people say, oh, you're just blaming the super rich on everything in Venezuela and around the world, you know. But I'll tell you one thing, that anybody that's up at the billionaire level around the world, I can't find really any exceptions, is part of the elite, part of the New World Order that is trying to put a safe haven for all around the world of the super rich billionaires to put global fascism where they will be completely safe and completely in control and have a police state protect them. And they'll be 100% in control of the world is what their plan is. While we run away being labor units, and they call a lot of us because they consider us unnecessary, and that's why they're pushing, with these billionaires pushing the depopulation agenda. Depopulation is pushed by Bill Gates, has been pushed by Buffett, I'm pretty sure, and the billionaires, it doesn't matter what country they're from. Sometimes they can be coerced and coaxed somewhat, like, and kept under control like they are, you know, the few that are still left in Russia. Right now, one, you know, sometimes when they act like they're still under control, like, you know, in Iran, they let a few still hang around, and one was still up some shit and was heavily corrupt, and now he's going to get executed for it. And they have to come against it. These billionaires, they turn it, you know, the kind of greed it takes to even become a billionaire. It's the kind of abuse you must do to your employees, the kind of just ego you must need to feel that you are entitled, that you need to grab $1 billion, you know, not stop at a reasonable number, or not give away some of your money when you get to that level of money. I mean, you're in the hundreds of millions. You don't start to say this is ridiculous. I already have a $20 million house. I have a $400,000 car. I have a $280,000 vacation home, and I have another $250,000 vacation home there. You know, at this point, your wife has a $40,000 plastic surgery on her. I mean, they got to think. This is completely unnecessary. I've done everything that could be up to my hedonistic desires at this point. It's just for the greed that's overtaken me, and I don't need this money. I should start donating and give it to their causes. You know, so I see cases like that where, you know, millionaires or whatever. It seems like, you know, it seems like when it comes to ultimately like the charity and stuff like that, it's never billionaires and stuff like that. They're ultimately, you know, doing stuff to fix up their entire community and pay for every poor person to get a mortgage, pay off all their mortgages. It's never in the United States. It's never that person. It always seems to be some guy with like $8 million or something like that just really worked hard his whole life or whatever and had a little bit of good fortune. And then at the end, you know, they realize how much good fortune they had and they want to give back their community. It's always some guy like that, but it's never some guy with $15 billion decides I'm going to get $12 billion away or something like that to my community. Never that guy. And it's the same way all around the world. Because there's a point where the human spirit gets overtaken by disease, and I mean, it says it, this is talked about like what in every whole book for a reason, because it's been the same forever. At a certain point, people lose their sense of humanity, and believe me, these people at the very top, the Rothschild, stuff like that, they're so past any sense of humanity. These people are monsters at this point, and they shouldn't be treated as people. Really. These are entities that are encompassing a human body. When I'm talking about the Rothschilds, that are just looking for total power and ultimately harm on the average person. The Rothschild agenda goes back to Venezuela, and it's one of their countries that they like to target for a long time, like to keep under heavy control. They always had a stranglehold on it in the 1900s, all the way up to the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. Andres Perez just encompassed that. I mean, talk about Andres Perez like he was the one responsible for all this. But the super rich that enabled him, and ultimately he's just a puppet of Rothschild. Andres Perez was the dictator, the figurehead of the country, and represented the Rothschilds' control in Venezuela, but he wasn't the ultimate leader of Venezuela, or what I say, the person that controlled Venezuela. The person that controlled Venezuela at that time was Jacob Rothschild, and that's how it was for a long time. Is that the Rothschilds were in total control, and their super rich buddies were under control of Venezuela. It's really sad to see a lot of people in the truth movement saying all this bad stuff about Chavez and saying all this stuff about Maduro. And I'll address it right here. That Chavez stood up to the Rothschilds and kicked them out of his country. I don't know what more do you want, really, when it comes to the whole sense of the anti-New World Order movement. He got his country pulled back. He stood up to the United States imperialism. I don't see anything that is a red flag to somebody that wasn't a true revolutionary. Also, here's another thing that he did, is that unlike, some socialist leaders in the past, he kept a very strong sense of nationalism in his country. He very much more resembled Tito than he did Lenin or not Mao. He was nowhere close to Mao. Mao was a degenerate dictator that starved millions of peasants. Chavez made sure that the same level as people in the same level in society were fed as the peasants in China. He didn't starve the poor in his country, and he made sure they were fed while they had never been fed before, and made sure the super rich that had always been fed, even though they had an abundance, a warehouse of food, made sure that they only got off because they could do just fine without the hard work of the people going all their sweat. The super rich of Venezuela, from all the way since the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. One of the major things, the petroleum, the oil, now was in the people's hands when they nationalized it. Hugo Chavez nationalizing the oil was one of the best decisions of a leader in history, because Chavez's oil reserves were huge. Venezuela had a huge amount of oil. And, the bad thing about ultimately the world we live in today, one of the things is that, I think ultimately, no matter how you look at it, even if you are more of a skeptic on global warming or believe it fully through, using lots of fossil fuels is at the very minimum, is going to be polluting the air. Even if it doesn't cause global warming, it's making the air we breathe more toxic, and there's a lot more effects on the water around the world and stuff like that. But unfortunately, that's the reality of the world we live in. That can't be changed, really. Every country on the planet uses oil. I think it's somewhat exaggerated the need for the need to go just immediately to sustainable. I think it's ultimately one of the. It's kind of the background issue when you could talk about the New World Order about to take over the planet. Trying to. That climate change, I think, is way further down the list, and it's way exaggerated. I remember the scare, the fear of people have terrorism is what the same fear that I felt at one point. Maybe just 2-3 years ago of global warming. I felt at one point that maybe the icebergs were melting and my whole state be underwater, and it'll happen in a lifetime, and then the world weather would get so wacky that we all slowly start to die or something. But ultimately, if we're going to start dying off because the super rich are going to be killing us, either by fascist regimes or they're going to be killing us by, the GMOs and that they've already started doing. But global warming is it's a tool somewhat, and I think it keeps people preoccupied on an issue that's not really that big of it's not the biggest issue. And there was all this talk, the icebergs will be melted by 2014 and stuff. Well, it's 2014 and we're still fine at this point. It might be happening, but it's happening at such a slow rate compared to what Al Gore had said that ultimately I think we need to focus on the fact that we have a new world order trying to put a fascist regime all over the planet, that we have government currently in charge of the United States that does false flags and killed 3,000 people just to start another war in the Middle East, and then kill 1.8 million Iraqis, and many of them, the people in Iraq, had burst effects afterward. That's what I'm worried about. And then they'll also undermine sovereignty of countries that push the Rothschild's agenda in Venezuela, and they try to attack Hugo Chavez so many different ways, via the media, via the social media, all these bogus anarcho-capitalist pages that are ultimately, I'm just going to say, is that they're doing more against the truth movement, making the truth movement make us look like a bunch of fedora wearing, neckbeard, cronies, smoking vapes, idiots. They're characterizing us like that. These people, these outlying examples, there's not all anarcho-capitalists are like that. People in this network that are anarcho-capitalists aren't like that necessarily. But there's these pages that are doing that. And they're just spreading American propaganda, spreading fascist propaganda, they're spreading sometimes even white supremacist neo-Nazi propaganda. And they're supporting people, big corporations, former dictatorships like Pinochet, that are the opposite of what they claim. They claim to be against the big state. They claim to be against statism. They are supporting the ultimate form of statism and say, it's actually the same fascism and socialism. It's not even comparable right now to the socialist countries of Chavez or during the Kirchner regime compared to the military dictatorships of the 80s, where people slaughtered by those governments. They were disappeared in bands. They were taken out into the countryside. The family never saw them again. These people, they did acts of terror. They did false flags. They're not doing that now. If you can tell me one fucking case where Chavez did a false flag in order to justify martial law or a law similar to that, I will probably be very mad at you for bringing that kind of propaganda onto me and trying to pass it on as real. Because if you can find something, you could probably be a Vox Latino or some other bullshit oligarch-ran media in Venezuela that is just there to try to bring the scum back into power, try to bring the Andres Perez scum. And I have a guy, one of my closest correspondents to this network, from RNA News, Freddy Nunez. He lives through all of this, and these people, these older generation, this is the worst. This could be the worst possible time. Some of these people that were younger when all this stuff was going down, and now they reach their 60s or 70s, they're going to be left for dead if the right wing takes back power in this year or next year or 28. Well, most likely about 2018 is what we're talking about. If the right wing are going to take power, it's going to be in the 2018 election. And I think unfortunately about the division that the media has been causing there, and that the fact that still 60% of the media in Venezuela is controlled by the opposition, and then the state media, they only have one channel. I think two channels that belong to the Venezuelan government. They have Venezuela TV and Telesur. Hispan TV, there's one state media. There's only, I think Telesur, Venezuela TV, the state channel. Telesur is not state ran. It's from based out of Venezuela and it's pro Venezuelan government, so I guess you could call it state. TV. I think they do get like Hispan TV, but Hispan TV is based from Iran, and they are so that doesn't really count. Yes, they have approached Chavez angle to them, but that's not what really even focused on. They have press TV. I think they might get that there too. RT Español, or RT actually, probably. They probably get that there. They also, until recently, they got CNN Latino. They got which supported openly terrorists on their network. They had BBC Latino. They still have that there, and they still spread the same amount of propaganda. This was a British accent and a little less direct. I mean, they don't have Bill O'Reilly or whatever, Megyn Kelly spitting out bullshit, in such layman's terms and spreading just complete lies, or like the Brian Williams or the Wolf Blitzer. Sure, BBC classes up a little bit compared to Fox News or something, but they're still doing the same thing. In fact, I think Fox News does a better service to us as a truth movement because they make the mainstream media look idiotic, and they make people realize that it's just complete dribble that's being spread on there. But it comes from smart people from the BBC and stuff like that, or smart-sounding people. Unfortunately, people are more likely to believe it because they're using big words. They're using sesquipedalians, as the BBC or put on a British accent here. Sesquipedalians, which means big words. They wouldn't just say big words because they're too good for that, and they want it to sound superior. And people believe when authority when they use the bigger words, and they'll believe BBC just because because they act more sophisticated. I, for one, am I've been to Colombia, and I've seen a lot of stuff in Colombia, and that's actually right now that's in trouble with their inflation. They have a major problem with with the paramilitary still, and at the border they're out of gas. The legal gas suppliers didn't even supply a lot of gas because they were relying on people mooching off Venezuelan gas and bringing it across the border. Now there's no more gas there. I saw it firsthand. There'll be one gas station in town. That's all they built for a city of 200 to 400,000 people, or one gas station serving 200,000 people or so. That's all they had because people didn't go to one gas station. They used to go to the illegal gas stations that were people front yard that were Venezuelan gas. So you go there, there's at these gas stations, and then you see a line of 80, 90 cars behind. People wait for hours to get gas. That's how it is now. And there's still Venezuelan gas on the streets of Colombia. Very few are able to get hold of it, but it still happens. But right now the border is shut down, and it's going to remain shut down because if Robert wants it to reopen, there's going to be looting happening from the other side. And I think ultimately it's a horrible, very inopportune time to open the border because the border's opened up. All the scum on the other side, the paramilitaries, the death squads, the Colombian government, even special ops teams and stuff like that, will all be crossed over and be trying to incite violence and trying to incite what could be. And here's the thing: is that I don't think that's going to be a simple power transition and then to right wing. I think what's very likely to happen is it's an all-out civil war because the Chavez supporters are ready to defend their country from the foreign invaders and these terrorists and the private militias in that country. They're not affiliated with the military. If such a need arises, these people are willing to rise up. These people on the right will be able to probably bring in a lot of supporters that are dumb enough to believe their rhetoric, and there will probably be a lot of right-wing supporters with guns too, as we've seen in the past, and we've seen clashes before, laying on both sides. People, but one side is duped, and the other side has somewhat of a common sense. But I'm saying is that once it happens, if there's a power vacuum in Venezuela, it's civil war probably. We're talking about an ugly, brutal civil war between one side that is controlled by the super rich, that is willing to draft a lot of people across the country to die so they can have their jacuzzi. And then there's the Chavistas that are commanded by the spirit of Hugo Chavez and are ready to defend the Constitution of '99 that the people voted for, and ready to defend the Venezuelan government and the Venezuelan people that are behind it and support the other pro-Bolivian revolution governments in the region with arms. But either way, a lot of people are going to die if that happens, and the United States is very likely to get involved in that case. That Venezuela has been threatened by the United States. There have been more. Another decree has been signed against so-called progressive, as the fake American liberals will call Barack Obama. And it's funny because I don't expect any change. Of course, he was another New World Order puppet in the succession. People think, oh, Sanders is different. Even people in the truth movement, unfortunately, believe Sanders is different. I don't see any change. And I am very kind of disappointed by Rafael Correa being naive enough as Bolivian, as he's supposed to be kind of a figurehead for the Bolivian movement now. Considering that Chavez is gone, it's kind of up to Morales, him. Maduro is not really holding up his position just by being the Venezuelan leader. Doesn't mean you're the head of the Bolivian revolution. But Correa endorsed Sanders for president, which was a little bit disappointing, and I believe it's really naive to believe so, and is not listened to all of his rhetoric. Kind of like how Obama, there was telltale signs even during the Obama's 07, 08, 40 election that Obama would end up the way he is. Now, and a lot of the South American leaders made that mistake, and later they specifically said they regretted it. And, Chavez officially, I guess, endorsed Obama, but immediately took it away practically once he became president. And the same thing is happening, it looks like now, with Correa and Sanders, but Maduro is not going to be naive enough to do it. I know that. He might not be the most powerful leader. However, he is, he's definitely got I think he's got a little bit more common sense maybe than Correa, who's a little bit younger and a little bit more naive. He's been around quite a while. And I don't think Morales is going to do the same. He's going to do the same, and he's not going to endorse Sanders. I don't think that really, there's been and it seems it's funny how little we trust our anybody of position and of power in our country. That oftentimes we're looking out for foreign leaders' advice from countries that we a lot of times call hostile for advice on the endorsing of endorsements for the next president. But you can tell that most of the leaders know that it's a rigged game, and that's why, for example, Putin is not going to give an endorsement, and he never gave an endorsement. It's really he said a few nice things about Trump as a businessman. He found it impressive what he was able to do, but he didn't say he supported his policies, nor did he say he supported anybody in the election. He just was being diplomatic ultimately. I think, Morales, Correa, giving the endorsement to Sanders, I think it's just a naive mistake, and I think that wasn't great of him to do. Gaddafi called Obama out before. I thought he was still around. He's calling out Sanders now. Before he was even elected, Obama was called out by Gaddafi. Gaddafi could already see that Obama was going to be fake, and despite his Muslim and African heritage, would betray it and continue to wage the imperialist war against Africa and the Middle East. If anybody wants to call him, 718-717-8296. 718-717-8296. In Venezuela, now with the Misión, or the Misión Bolivianos, the Bolivian missions, the people that never even had a possibility of having any kind of a formal education now have an education. The people that had no chance of health care, many people that died before in the slums of Caracas are now in. That's another huge that the Venezuelan government took when they did the Bolivian missions was to put housing for the poor the super poor, and now those places of those slums are now getting torn down, and now nice apartments are being built that are paid for by the Bolivarian government of Venezuela. And now people, in fact, a huge slum tower that for a long time stood, it was like a symbol of the Andres Perez poverty, came down not that long ago. And now that's gone, and now just these Bolivian missions are being built, small houses, even, like the size of a house I live here in Florida, are now being built throughout Venezuela, which I can tell you that, for example, in Colombia, we have a lot of times what I saw there is, 8 people live in a house with 1,000 square foot or less. I don't think that's really the case now in Venezuela. And Colombia does have social housing, but it's absolutely abysmal. I mean, I saw stuff like that. It's literally it's less than it's practically shackling to some people, just as an excuse to act like that the government of Colombia has any humanitarian concern. But the truth is that they don't. They are ultimately they're ultimately just a proxy of the United States, and are driving their country towards a total economic collapse. People say that Venezuela is near an economic collapse, but I'll tell you something, is that they are far from it. I think that this oil prices, going down, people think the oil prices going down are going to stay this way for a long time. I can tell you that it's not going to. Once summer comes, the oil prices are probably going to come right back up. And most likely there will be the Venezuelan government will recover, and they have strong allies that can keep them afloat. The oil, it is bad that they're so reliant on oil, but because of the economic embargoes, the oil is practically the main thing that's kept them afloat all these years. There's not many people that can trade with. And here's the thing is that I think they're going to follow somewhat of a Russian model, the reboot of what they did, and with the Russians also helping them, they'll be able to they'll bounce back. The only thing is whether this country will fall into civil war or fall into a coup before that. And I think that there's a high likelihood that there will be a hard election called in Venezuela. And when that happens, people will have to be ready to, I think that the people on the Bolivarian militia side need to be ready to defend their country, because if it's a close vote, there's a high likelihood that violence is going to ensue right after, because either A, that on with the money are going to conspire to rig the elections and have it go 51, 52% towards the MUD, which is the opposition fascist side of the Venezuelan politics, or it could go 52 to 55%, which I believe is what they will win by ultimately if Maduro is not the candidate, as long as they pick somebody else. And there's quite a few pool candidates could be put in the Party of Socialists, the Unity of Venezuela, who could be brought in to run. There's a few candidates that could be put in that place instead of Maduro. But lost my train of thought there. But if that the 55% could be denied, or definitely if it's at 50 or 50.3 or whatever percent, it's a small margin. Right when you're going to test that, and now so they're going to let it, like what happened in 2013, where they ultimately just gave up. Well, they didn't give up, because just a few months later they started violent action where they killed 43 innocent Venezuelans via violence. And now people say that Leopoldo Lopez is innocent. Leopoldo Lopez doesn't deserve what has happened to him. Leopoldo Lopez is a terrorist, and in 43 people were killed by him. He deserved the 13 years, indirectly made by him. He didn't shoot the gun actually himself, but he inspired other people to do it, and commanded a group of bandits that did it. You got 13 years. I think it was very much a fair sentence. Maybe too late, if that. Chavez was spent time in jail for trying to do a move by the military that was heavily supported by the people, which ultimately, isn't that somewhat the duty of the military in a scenario like that, is to, if there is a, they're there to uphold the Constitution. And what Andrew Perez did in the Caracas was very unconstitutional. And Chavez ultimately upheld his duty and did a military coup, or attempted to, and they got arrested for it. So he, Leopoldo Lopez is kind of barking up the wrong branch on that, because Chavez, the head of the Bolivarian Revolution, was what I would say was unjustly jailed. But he only spent 2 years, and he was pardoned in '94. It's funny, in the '90s, the whole atmosphere of Venezuela politically changed, because people realized quickly how corrupt Andrés Perez was. It was capped off by by one of the people that Venezuela will later have as the vice president, actually, and was actually Chavez was picked as the vice president, and was a long-time activist. He was the corrupt Venezuelan government of the past, not just there's different eras of Venezuela history divided up into the Punto I think that's what it's called. That year is what was from like 59 to all the way till 98. However, the difference was that that's because they say that's the time of official democracy came in. Before that, it was official dictatorship. So really, there was dictators involved. I say it was ultimately just on a fake dictatorship, and definitely from the end of Perez, he was on what now we look back at history. He's a dictator. Was a dictator. He's dead now. But Andrés Perez was ultimately shown to be guilty of corruption by Rangel, Jose Rangel, I believe his name is, who later becomes vice president from 2002 to 2007, who was a long-time activist. He was an activist from the 40s, actually. He got arrested in 48 about the Venezuelan dictatorship, and he slowly brought himself up through politics in around 1970, I think, is when he got elected into the Venezuelan parliament or whatever at the time. And he actually was, he was coming up in power during the time of Andrés Perez, as he was coming up when he came up to be the president. And then as his dictatorship became more horrific, I guess, Rangel actually led a presidential run, which he didn't get much of the vote, but eventually he would have a very big say in Venezuela's politics. He eventually became vice president. He also helped bring down Andrés Perez because he was one of the people that brought the claims of corruption against him in the Supreme Court. Unlikely, was unlikely to do it, but they actually did. They proved the claims, and then they decided that Andrés Perez was going to be impeached. So now the strongman dictator was gone out of the picture. Now Chavez would be pardoned, actually, because the overwhelming support of the people, and now shifted to Chavez, and the overwhelming attitude of people realized Chavez had been what looked to be falsely imprisoned. So Chavez was released out of prison, and he can gain the support, which would later lead to the movement for a Fifth Republic. Which the thing was that Chavez wasn't very much into politics. He didn't believe that it could be changed by the system. In the system, he didn't believe they could play by the system's rules by participating in an election, which he largely believed to be rigged, and they believed that it would just be taken away from him. So he was, at first, when he got out of prison, he wasn't thinking that way, running in '98 for the election, but he would start this movement a few years later. After he garnered a lot of support, the Fifth Republic movement was based on this idea of a Fifth Republic, as there had been four more republics, I guess, in Venezuelan history. It was really to start a new era, really to start a new movement, and it did. It didn't just affect Venezuela, it affected all of South America into the future, and for better. In '97, he gained he realized after he had been to meetings in '95, '96, that his advisors pretty much told him, well, how about this? You do run because you can prove to them. You'll get 70% of the support of the country. There'll be nobody can take away such an overwhelming victory. So he actually did run, and then he went across. He brought the spirit of all the people throughout the country, all throughout Venezuela, to his movement. And then in '98, he won very convincingly against the establishment. And Chavez was now the president of Venezuela. And the rest is history. The next 15 years it was the nationalization of oil, retrieving Venezuela's gold, the Bolivian missions, the Chavista militias coming up, the ends of the slums, the stand up to George W. Bush, which I wish we could play sound clips on the show. If maybe we could find a way by the end of the show somehow put in a sound clip here, but I don't know how that's going to work by the format we do the shows. But there's there was the funny instance right after the Iraq War started. He calls out George Bush and calls him a donkey and all the stuff that he is. He calls him an alcoholic, which stung Bush, I bet, a little bit because, I was like, that is almost a little bit, they're almost below the belt on that one. But then you realize it's George W. Bush. He deserved it. But yeah, call him an alcoholic because he was actually an alcoholic at one point, and it looks like, people say, oh, he was sober at the time of his presidency. He was sober for a long time before presidency. I really doubt it. But alcoholic or whatever, not all alcoholics are mass murderers. So I'm not going to connect that. I'm just he would have been a shithead even if it wasn't an alcoholic, I would say. But I don't think you could make him do the horrible decisions he did. That was purely how he was following the New World Order's agenda. But he got called a genocidal bastard pretty much, and he called him a coward. It was one of the best moments of just Venezuelan recorded history. Chavez is berated. I mean, people talk about how bad Joe Bush was roasted at the Donald Trump with the Republican primary or whatever. This made that look like him calling him a poop or something. This was pretty bad. It was like 3 minutes of insults. It goes in English and insults him, calls him a donkey in English, which Chavez almost never spoke in English, and he didn't speak much English. I've only seen him speak English about 3 or 4 instances ever. He one time spoke English as Oliver Stone. I saw, and he just a few words that they learned when he was in school. But he never really learned English. It's not like Putin, who knows English, actually knows it very well. It's kind of weird, because you don't really think of Putin knowing English, but he actually knows like 4 languages. Chavez, he didn't know. He didn't know English. I don't even know if he knew a foreign language. But his political mastery came in other aspects. And he was more. He wasn't. I mean, there might be a little bit difference, on the way they approach the rest of the world. Putin is very it skates around, causing trouble, I guess, but still at the same time does little jabs here and there. But ultimately, he's very diplomatic, and his diplomacy is very top of the line. Chavez, however, his diplomacy wasn't the best because he wasn't really going for diplomacy. In fact, he was going for standing up to your boy, and his stance was that you don't make friends with your enemies. You don't pretend it. You just say what's on your mind, and because it's not going to change anything. They're still going to do the horrible shit to you, or try to do it, if you act nice to them, as if you just say what they really are. And then you inspire people to go against them, inspire the people to go against the people who are aspiring to do this horrible shit to your country when you call them out for it at a big stage. Like the one time when he called George Bush the devil at the UN. That was almost 10 years ago now since he did that. George Bush being the devil is not far from the case. ultimately the Rothschilds, they're this close to the devil. However, George W. Bush and his family are just very wicked. H.W. Bush is a cold motherfucker. He said that the American people found out what him and his buddies had done, they would chase him and his buddies down with nooses and lynch them and hang them, because that's the amount of horrors that were done from the Iraq War to what he had done was banking during this time, and this close for the New World Order was nothing else than what the conspiracy theorists supposedly, what they call conspiracy theorists, really what the conspiracy realists had said about the New World Order. It's the same thing. He was calling for that same. There was the same term, and he was calling for that same New World Order the conspiracy realists accused them of being a part of. I think that people that still support, the people that still stick by Bush and stick by Reagan and stick by George W. Bush, Clinton, any of these presidents, and Obama, Bush. I mean, you have to be completely brainwashed at this point. And I think that people are going to call me a socialist sympathizer about that. And we'll get a lot of flack probably even from people on this network, or maybe people outside the network are in the truth movement. That's for sure. I'm definitely going to get flack for people in the truth movement for my stances that I have on justice. I mean, I got people just constantly berate this guy in the truth movement, and it's like media, they're going to do that. I'm not shocked by that. I'm shocked by people doing the truth movement. When the mainstream media, just mainstream media propaganda. I'm not shocked when the mainstream media spreads their own propaganda, but when it's really bizarre. And Chavez deserves his legacy, the person, what he did for his country. It was one of the best. He stood up to the Zionists. He stood up to the United States government. He stood up to the bankers. There's really nobody he didn't stand up to. And if people are now suffering because of international embargoes on Venezuela, if people are now suffering from, I would say, the United States putting these sanctions on them, and also unleashing these terrorists in their country that are trying to construct Venezuela. But their country is not suffering from the Bolivian Revolution. It's actually being kept afloat by the Bolivian Revolution. If this is some other leader, and let's say that, let's go on a turn of the timeline and say that after Chavez's death, Maduro wasn't elected. Okay, Carlos Radonsky became the president. The people are being fed because of this Chavista government. If it wasn't for that, this country would have. If it was Carlos Radonsky was in power, this country would not. People would have starved a long time ago. There'd be riots in the streets. There'd be a high chance that the Carrasco type event would have happened again. There would have been the economy would have totally collapsed a year ago. They would be at this point asking the United States for any kind of help or whatever, and the United States would be probably pretty reluctant to give it to them. And that would ultimately they would be borrowing on money, and they would be in such terrible debt. And who would pay for the long run? The poor people of Venezuela. Carlos Radonsky would also have probably started some kind of martial law that hasn't happened yet in Venezuela, despite all these horrific events that happened at the hands of the terrorists. They're not going to give up their liberties because of it. It's like Benjamin Franklin said, is that if people that are willing to give up liberty for security will and deserve neither. And that's how Venezuelan people's mindset is, that they're not going to succumb to having tanks and tons of troops on the streets just to protect them from the terrorists. They're going to continue to live their lives, because if they change how the government's being ran and compromise their ideals, then at that point you are being terrorized. But they're not being terrorized. They're not going to let them be terrorized by these Israeli, American-funded terrorists that are in the country. They would be in very big trouble at this point, and there'd be a lot more dead in Venezuela if Carlos Radonsky had taken power. And there's people that became victim of the the oligarchy that is oligarchy. What's the term I'm looking for here? Well, anyway, the oligarchy that's in exile, that's trying to take it. They at large. That's what I was saying. That's kind of the way to describe them. They're at large. They haven't been quite crushed yet because a lot of them have left the country. But they're still trying to reach their, put their hands back on Venezuela. And the oligarchy in exile is still trying to control Venezuela and trying to retake power. But these are the people that became victims in Venezuela now. And that's why there is poverty again starting to happen. Because, and I think it ultimately, once it does come back down to Maduro has been a little bit too weak, hasn't really taken command, has fear of I don't know what exactly. And he needs to just do what Chavez did and control, control corporations, crush them down, and, what human rights violations, these fake human rights committees are going to say stuff about them. The Saudi-led UN Human Rights Committee is going to make bullshit about them. But who cares what they got to say? They're going to say stuff about you anyways. You just got to go after them, go after the people that are causing problems in your country, and crush the oligarchy. Chavez was going really fast at it, going really fast at creating progress. I mean, it would have made almost complete 180 in his 15 years there. Maduro, after 3 years, I gotta say that he's been a little bit too soft, a little bit too weak, and I just don't think he was fit to be leader. I think he's a great guy. I think he has a great revolutionary spirit, and I think his fit was somewhere else in the Venezuelan government, but wasn't president. His fit was made vice president. His fit might have been down as a committee of some, the head of some committee, but the president who should have gotten that should have been probably. I think it's someone. I think Rangel or somebody like him deserved it, and I think somebody that had leadership, so much more leadership experience than Maduro deserved. Maduro hadn't even been in politics that long. Let me put this in perspective. Maduro came from being a bus driver. He was literally a bus driver 30 years ago. He had two completely different lives. One from a blue-collar background, being a bus driver, to now he's the president of the country. I mean, how many bus drivers could say that they became president of the country? It's got to be a wild life, wild experience. However, I think Chavez made a quick decision. He knew that he had to make a good decision or else that he could go very wrong at the elections and that there'd be no PSUV candidate elected and Berezovsky would just be handed the election. However, I think he did make a right decision there by picking somebody compared to nobody to run at the PSUV for the PSUV in April 2013 after his death. And when he did that, in his final speech, he named Maduro to be that person. However, I think we should consider a few other people. And I think now that some of the younger PSUV people are starting to come up in their 40s and their 50s and now have had some experience and had a long time to believe in government and went through some trying times, coup attempts and stuff. I think one of them could be picked. I think Tariq Saad is a very great candidate, and I think he would very much, I think he would just be great. Or if he's not, I think he should at least be a higher position than he is now, as the ombudsman or whatever of Venezuela. I see a lot of leadership qualities in him. I see the same kind of power in his voice that Chavez had. Of course, I'm 18. I've done a lot of analysis of the Venezuelan government. I've done a lot of analysis of the South American situation. However, and I'm not saying I pick him automatically, but I'm saying is that if I was there, if I was Chavez sitting there, or if I was, he wasn't really saying he wasn't too big. I'm saying if I was, now the decision comes down, if I'm one of the people at the PSUV table that's making the decision who will be the nominee in an early election that would happen this year or whatever, I would at least suggest Tariq Saad. And he very signifies as being a Lebanese Christian. He really signifies the Arabic Venezuelan solidarity. I think that would be very important, personified in one person. that for Venezuela. I think that Hugo Chavez, it's almost, you can't compete with somebody. You know, it's the energy he had. I put a lot of stuff the last few days on my Facebook, and I had a lot of reminiscing a little bit. I remember when he was still around, and I was much, you know, I was just a really young teenager at that point. He was one of the first people I really looked up to in politics and being Latin, and I think that in some ways he connects to the Latin people a little bit better than maybe to the average American. I think that, you know, if you understand Spanish and you hear the speeches and hear just the rhetoric that gives you goosebumps, and the amount, you know, this person, he came from a village was practically nothing. He was less than what I have now. It was what most of us have now. He came from less than that. In the 1950s, the 60s, he grew up at the end of the Venezuelan dictatorship and the new dictatorship in Junta Vizmo. And he in 1971 actually ultimately gave him a chance to become who he was. He joined the military. I mean, he was a star cadet, and he slowly came up in the ranks. But he was inspired, you know, in a way. This group, the revolutionary group, forget what exactly the name was right now, but this revolutionary group, they were telling him that they had to go fight. And in fighting them, he said that, you know, he started realizing that those causes that he was fighting for weren't crazy. They weren't terrorists, and what they were doing to them was really wrong. And he that opened his eyes to the ideas of socialism, the ideas of anti-imperialism, as they probably started to realize that, well, wow, my government is completely bound down to the hands of D.C., and we're all pawns in it. And then Chavez, he started that movement well before it even was before he even became president. In 1982, when he was in his late 20s, he made the MBR 200 group, yeah. Which is a little study group / political movement, but it was the beginning of the Bolivarian thought, the Simon Bolivar, and what he really stood for. You know, a lot of American leaders will say that they highly look up to Bolivar, but they don't really stand for what Bolivar stood for. And they bowed down to imperialist powers while Bolivar fought imperialist powers and kicked Spain out of South America. And, you know, looked at these other South American heroes. I think, you know, and the people, also he started to embrace, I think, Chavez, you know, one of the things he embraced during his presidency was that South American history is not exclusively Spanish. It's not exclusively Spanish, because there's these Amerindians, and those were the people that were in South America before the Spanish brought was what we see as Hispanics nowadays. And also, another thing that combines into the modern Hispanic equation and why Hispanics, many of them look the way they do, is because a lot of African blood, and a lot of African blood is in the South American blood. And they share the traditions, and they share the cultures. And South America and the African traditions of anti-imperialism in the last 20th century, there's a lot of things combined with it. And I think that Chavez shared a lot of solidarity with his African brothers, Muammar Gaddafi and Robert Mugabe, especially Muammar Gaddafi, who he said it was a tragedy when he died. And Chavez didn't die much later. In fact, he was already sick with cancer when Muammar Gaddafi was brutally murdered in the desert of Libya. And it's weird, you know, Robert Mugabe, out of all of them, outlives everybody. I'd say that, you know, it's probably because of I think that he has the most experience. He had the most experience before he even became a leader. He was in like his 60s before he even became a leader. Now he's into his 90s. People keep electing him, and it's democratic. But the people, Mugabe, you know, he and Chavez shared support each other, and they both, you know, grew from the same kind of base. But, you know, Mugabe was the Africans that were opposed to British and American imperialism, the poor classes, and Venezuela was the poor class as opposed to British and American imperialism as well. Showed a lot of solidarity with the Arabic brothers, and the Palestinian cause Chavez was fervently in support of. And compared to, he was very strongly against the Zionist and the racist fascist regime of Tel Aviv, and he called out Israel for funding the opposition against them. And he said that's why the opposition never talks about Israel, because they're funded by Israel, and that Mossad is always conspiring against South America and the Third World, and there's many agents in the Third World. And the Mossad, it's true, they're everywhere, and that's what's been proven. That was the operations they've done around the world. And they have a history. They did one of the worst false flags, and which the sad thing about false flags a lot of times is that people do die in most false flags. And the people that are victims of whoever, they're not like those victims don't exist. Those victims just are victims of a different group other than the one stated by the official story. So, the official story for a while in Argentina was that what probably was an Iranian-connected group blew up a Jewish center in Argentina, but the truth was it was Israel doing the false flag, and that's what it seemed to have been unraveled during the Kirchner government. But he showed a lot of solidarity with the other third world leaders, and with the Palestinian cause. And he remember one of the most iconic moments. Is Chavez saying "Maldito Estado de Israel," is saying "Damn you, State of Israel," and he fervently called out Israel for everything, or not allowing even water to the Palestinian people, and then talking about how they are blocked into practically a prison. It's worse than a prison, because the Palestinians, they don't get food, water, or anything like that. It is the hellacious circumstance that the Palestinian people live in, and Chavez called out Israel for doing so. And Chavez was really in support of the Palestinians, and the Palestinians love him there. He's one of the most adored leaders probably in recent history, and along with Muammar Gaddafi, Nanja Ahmadinejad. I think that Chavez is more adored than even Nanja Ahmadinejad. He's probably right under Muammar Gaddafi as made the most adored leader in Palestine. And Chavez, like when Muammar Gaddafi in Mugabe, they really submit. Mostly Gaddafi at the head of it started the pride for Africa. It started the pride of being African, and brought together African countries. It was about to bring them all into a continent-wide currency that would oppose the Rothschilds and finally kick the Rothschilds out of Africa and end neocolonialism in Africa. So, that's what Chavez is about to do in South America. He was about to end neocolonialism in South America, and it's still very possible it can continue. And I think that's the next leader of Venezuela needs to really push across, because UNASUR has been this project that's been practically pending, really since Chavez died. Well, what needs to happen? What needs to happen is that they need to have a person that is willing to make this come to reality and become a functioning bank for all of South America to use, that will oppose the IMF, the World Bank. And that's one of the major, I would say, it's one of the biggest things that Chavez did. And so what, I think Chavez is so demonized really about is that follow the money. He was going to end the big bankers' reach into South America, and by making a continent-wide bank, UNASUR, which, going by a continent-wide model, a regional model, or a national model, opposed to the globalist model, that's what really will get you killed in this world as a leader, is when you start making complete independence from banking system. And they tried to, they killed Muammar Gaddafi for it in Africa, because it's the most powerful continent in the world when united. It's the largest continent in the world. So Muammar Gaddafi wasn't granted to live any longer, and he was murdered for it. Chavez died from cancer. I'll get into that a little bit more towards the end of the show. By the way, if anybody wants to call in, 718-717-8296, 718-717-8296. Here at the UCY Radio, Voice of Rebellion Radio, the only place where you can catch such an informative. There might be other radio shows tonight that are doing other great Hugo Chavez shows, but I implore you to listen to this Hugo Chavez show. But the UNASUR was one of his Chavez's greatest constructions, and it was constructed throughout the 2000s into the 2010s, and now he also made, it's like what the African Union that he was making over there, and Gaddafi was making over there. It's what the actually UNASUR is the organization, and Banco del Sur was going to be the bank, and Banco del Sur hasn't officially started operating really yet, but it's there when will be actually kicked into power. And I think that the next leader of Venezuela has a major responsibility is making it happen. Maduro's major responsibility, and he did his major responsibility, but a lot of somewhat, and a lot of his other responsibilities kind of failed on him. But he did keep Venezuela together and keep them from Venezuela from falling apart from either economic disaster or the country falling into total violence. He kept that from happening in his 3 years that he's been president so far. And when it comes to an end, may it comes to an end this year, or may it comes to an end in 2018, hopefully Maduro will have at least kept that. And that's what Maduro will be kept. He won't be viewed in a bad light, I don't think, in the history of Venezuelan leaders. It was a very short time compared to Chavez and compared to other leaders. But Maduro's legacy is going to be remembered as the transition leader that kept everything stable. Now we need to go to the next step. We need to go to the next leader. Because all Maduro has been, it seemed like it felt like a long interim presidency. That's what it's felt like ever since Chavez passed in Venezuela. And now they need to go to a powerful leader that's going to be there for the long haul, till 2024, 2030 at least. I would hope that the next president stays around for at least 10 years. So 2 terms, I'm hoping, is what the next. But I think what's this. That's what it's going to take to end this kind of a hangover feeling, of the 2014 violence and all the bad stuff that's happened with Chavez's death. It's going to take a strong leader that pushes the country stronger forward, and pushes South America forward. Because the leader of Venezuela's duty, I think, is not only to lead, ultimately lead Venezuela. I think it's also to lead South America against imperialism. That's what it seems like. That's what Chavez did. He led not just the Venezuela, but he led the entire Bolivian revolution against imperialism in the United States and of the Israel and the New World Order's agenda. And he was like the Gaddafi of Africa. But the thing was also Gaddafi didn't have as many friends in Africa as Chavez did. Gaddafi only had a few leaders in Africa that thought like him. Chavez had most of the continent that thought like him. And I think that's why they were able to achieve so much in such a short time. It took Gaddafi 42 years to get to the point that what Chavez was able to do in the 10 to 12 years or so. And it's like, having friends around in the region that think alike or with you is important. I mean, look at Putin. He's been able to achieve so many things this term because he has quite a few friends around him. Belarus, Slovakia, whatever. Now in Venezuela, they were able to get so much done those 10 to 15 years because they were able to inspire a movement that's encompassed most of the continent. You have Bolivia, you have Ecuador, you have Brazil, you had Argentina for a long time. You have Uruguay for a long time. There's Paraguay Fernando Lugo was removed from power when he was sick from cancer. Kind of a interesting developments that happened. Let's see, not a major country, ma'am, forgetting here. And even as well, you had the whole mix. You had Chile for a while. Chile, Peru. They were all on board with Luis Chavez. And the Caribbean countries that are on board with Chavez, for a long time, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, which of course has been always on board with Chavez because Cuba was the first country to have a revolution in Latin America well before the South American Revolution. And what many people say about what happened in South America is what Che would wanted for South America, is that finally South America is no longer dependent on the United States, is no longer dependent on the UK or Israel or these other countries. Now they have become very close to being self-sustainable. And there's been some trying times. It's been very difficult the last few years. But they're going to get over it, I believe. And I believe by 2020, we're going to be looking at much different South America, and I think that this is maybe the weeding out might happen at this point, and people that are not necessarily fit to be leaders or really to be, a major voice in this revolution might be weeded out. I think this is what's going to happen with Maduro. Is that we've realized, the revolutionaries in South America, and I think that the people of Venezuela realize that Maduro just isn't a great fit. And I don't think it's the end for Maduro's political career either. I think Maduro might be a good governor even of a country, but I don't think he's a great president. I think that he's just weak, and I don't think that I think it was a rash decision by Chavez to put him there. I think that the permanent leader they've been looking ever almost since they took power. I think the leadership of the PSUV realized that this wasn't a great decision to make. We should look elsewhere for the next leader because because this guy is not going to get done. And wow, we're already at 10:25 Eastern time, and we can just keep talking about Chavez, and it's the energy that he had. It's unmatchable by anybody. I mean, Gaddafi added someone, and then when I hear his, I don't speak Arabic, right? When I hear his voice and hear his energy, that gives me goosebumps as well. But Chavez knowing Spanish and hearing all this rhetoric straight from the language, that gives me goosebumps. And seeing the kind of energy he had. I mean, he would sing in front of the people. One of the most iconic moments was dancing at a rally, and this was when he was suffering from cancer. October of 2012. This was on his last run for presidency. On October 7th, 2012, he won the election, but this was just a few days before. He actually, this is very famous because he just stands out there in the rain and continues his rally, and the people are so into it, they're still into the rally. And he starts to dance. And he's very, you can see the energy on him, and you can see he's so into it. The music is just great, the people, the energy of it. It was one of the most iconic moments, I think, of the Bolivarian Revolution, because even with the sickness, even with the trouble of the Bolivarian Revolution, the energy of the Bolivarian Revolution is still there. The energy of Chavez is still there, and and it's funny because it was Hugo Chavez. He continues to talk at the rally in the rain, while Barack Obama he has to have his Marine holding an umbrella right there. He can't even hold his own umbrella. Chavez doesn't even need an umbrella, which I think in some ways that Chavez he overworked himself. I think that might have been the reason that he wasn't successful in cancer treatments, and but there's other reasons why I don't think the cancer treatments were successful. I'll get to that towards the end of the show. But I think that Chavez, he was a hard worker. Bush talked about how he went to bed at 9 p.m. Because he was a puppet and he didn't need to do much. He just forwarded. He forwarded what was coming from the horse's mouth and bringing it out to the people in a way that doesn't sound so evil with his own Bushisms. But Chavez worked very hard because he was battling a huge fight for the Bolivarian Revolution and battling a huge fight for all of South America. And I think that's ultimately Chavez. He stood apart from the crowd. Well, how hard he worked, and he noted that he practically ran on coffee. He didn't sleep much. He drank. When Oliver Stone was down there filming a movie about him, and all these different South American leaders, it was noted that he was drinking like 30 to 40 cups of coffee a day, and a cup of coffee. It was almost like a trademark of Chavez. It feels ugly kind of saying trademark when he was a revolutionary leader. Trademark just feels so corporate of a word. I mean, that's just a word that we use. I mean, it's kind of funny how society puts in our vernacular that we will never be able to get out of our vernacular because of just the way we raise. And down in Venezuela, the people right now, today, tomorrow, are for the next like 8 days, they're having rallies and stuff in support of Chavez. They're having I think that in a way this is a really good sign. I thought the 30th anniversary was going to be very uneventful. I thought that at most there would be a few mentions on Facebook and maybe a couple stories to tell a story or whatever, but it'd be about it. But it seems like all around the world, activists are remembering Chavez, and people in Venezuela are remembering Chavez maybe more than even the first or second anniversary. I think that the spirit of Chavez is there more than ever. It's not eroding away as time goes on, but it's like a fine wine. It's getting better. And I think that, with the trouble that has happened where they have where they're the supermajority of the fascists have now taken over the National Assembly, and then that they might try to get rid of the National Assembly. They might try to get rid of Maduro. Now with these troubles, it's really strengthens the Chavista spirit. And, some people were calling it in December when it happened. I was kind of a little bit, I have to say, when it was happening, I was very worried. I wasn't sure what would happen. I was very skeptical that this would happen. But now that it's actually happened, it really brightens a lot of us, that knowing that it was Chavez back in the hearts of the people, there won't be no U.S. takeover of Venezuela. Now, I think that if this election goes to left wing, I'll have to go convincingly, because unless there's a high likelihood of violence if we don't if we don't win convincingly, because they're going to contest the election. They're going to do violent means like they did back in 2013 against Maduro. Just months after the election, they went to violent means to try to take power. And when I say take back power, yeah, it's kind of a ultimately these are the same people that were controlled back in the 80s and 90s, Andres Perez era that is now they're trying to retake power. And they've been exiled to Colombia, working with the Colombian government, they're working with the United States government. But these are the same power-hungry officials that want power again. And this is not the first time they've been there. So it's not like voted in the MUD to fully empower. They have not only the National Assembly, but the vice, or they take both the vice and the president in that case. But the military and the presidency are all now MUD. This would be the first time it's happened. This would just be a repeat of what's happened before. This is the first time of the PSV currently in power. This is the first time that's happened. A socialist government in charge of Venezuela, and not a socialist government, an anti-imperialist government, and a government with a lot of pride for their nation, a lot of pride for Venezuela. So I think the nationalism of Venezuela has surged, and it's a good nationalism. It's not a nationalism like the Ukraine and the Stefan Bandera type nationalism in Ukraine. In Ukraine, the nationalism is being used as a front for imperialism. Well, the United States ultimately is a proxy government for the United States. This is a true nationalism where they stand up to all threats from globalists, from the United States, and from the bankers. What we see in Venezuela is superior to, that nationalism is superior to what usually nationalism is. And Chavez, I think that when it comes to Latin American pride that Jay talked about, and Latin American unity, it's like what Gaddafi was able to do in Africa, or what Tito was able to do in the Yugoslavia. This bringing of unity is very rare for leaders to be able to do so, and no South American really, after Bolivar, was able to do so until Chavez. And many people will say that Chavez was a reincarnation of Bolivar. And I think that Chavez would be too humble to take that title. I think that some people even say that Chavez is a reincarnation of Che. Or, well, I don't want to say that, but Che was still alive when Chavez was until Chavez was 13 or something like that. Let's say he was like the next Che, I think it'd be too humble to take that from me. He's definitely be too humble to take that he's the next Bolivar. He would say that he could follow in the steps of Bolivar and try to bring unity like Bolivar brought to South America. but he could never actually duplicate what he was able to do for South America. Bolivar actually visited his house in Bogota, and it was kind of a powerful experience in 2013, and it was really cool. I remember banging my head on the door because that house was made for the Bolivar, which is much shorter than me. And I'm a pretty tall guy, and I was just banging him right on the forehead. I think I feel like I hurt myself a few times on that trip down to Colombia that time. And it's funny, the time I go alone, I didn't get hurt like one time ever. Well, because I was busting my ass running out the door one day. That's the only time. But when I went with my mom, I think I hit my head in Bolivar's house. And I was at least a few other instances where I got hurt. I only got hurt like one time on this when I went alone. It just been raining, so and the floor was super wet outside. I was running to the store, and then bam, right on my side. I just got right back up. Going back to that was in the border town, where I spent a lot of the time on this last. I saw firsthand Colombia's, especially on the border. They're really struggling. It was pretty rough to see that, and the prices in the country are compared to the wages are ridiculous. They only make $120 a month minimum wage in Colombia, and a lot of people are paid wages very similar to that. It's in Colombia. They continue they're suffering from a similar type of problem than what the Andres Perez dictatorship was like. Instead of Andres Perez, it's more like Alvaro Uribe and Santos are more of the figureheads that ultimately is the new world order control in Colombia. And Venezuela is one of the countries that did not have the Rothschild banks influence them to this day. And I don't think that they're going to. I think ultimately they're not going to succumb to them. And it will take something major like a coup, which they've already tried two attempts. So bring on another one. It was going to happen. Okay, they've already had they're going to have to literally invade. It looks like in order to an election. I think that Maduro would not Maduro, but the PSUV would survive. The problem Maduro's the one that's put up there, and the one to take the mound, stay on the mound as we go into the 7th, 8th inning here. It's not going to work out very well. It's like that. We're going to have to go to our top reliever for this. Maduro, he's at best a middle reliever. But he's not a great bullpen guy. That's why we put him in the 6th, 7th inning. Chavez, while he was taken out in the 5th, did a great job. Great through 5 innings, 0 runs allowed, and made 2 hits allowed the whole time. But unforeseen circumstances brought him out of the game. Maduro comes in the middle right there, and he pitches 1 or 2 innings or something like that. But now we're about to get into the 7th inning, stretching beyond. Now we need somebody that can go the next couple innings and really close out. And when I talk about close out, that's the big goal. When finally Unisor and Banco de Sur work the way they do, ultimately really the biggest objective yet to have been done in the Bolivian Revolution will have been done. That's not even Chavez or Maduro was able to do. Now, whoever guy makes that happen, I'll give a huge round of applause to. Well, the biggest thing that Chavez did was creating those things. I would say the biggest thing Chavez did, but it's one of the biggest things. The biggest thing Chavez did was retrieving Venezuela's gold, kick out the Rothschilds. And it was one of the last things he did, really, was finish off the retrieving of Venezuela's gold. So it was that was like in 2011, and then oddly enough, around that time is when he gets cancer, and you die. 2 years later, and he kicked out the Rothschilds before that. That's really the biggest thing that Chavez did. And the biggest thing Chavez did, I would say, ultimately, is stealing the spirit of the revolution inside Venezuelan people. And making the people that were willing to take back their country. That was the biggest thing Chavez did, and making the people proud to be Venezuelan again, and make the people proud of, or not ashamed of, came from a humble background. The president came from a humble background. The president, Hugo Chavez, came from a very small town, Sabneta, in Barinas, Venezuela, and he later on would become, through the military academy, and later on through the through his election, or in his wild ride up to his election, and then the election, he becomes the president and did all the things that he did from 99 to 2013. Chavez had many vice presidents during that time, made a lot of changes. There was between his first one, I only had like a couple years, and then, with the changing times and the changing conditions, and as I guess his views might even change, he put a new guy, and that kept the thing going. And I think that was one of the great things he did as a manager, is that he ultimately made changes when necessary, and didn't really stick to stuff that wasn't working anymore. And with the economy, that's how he was able to do great economic changes, is that he changed stuff up as it went, and as the times changed. And then we put in Diosdado Caballos in 2002, and then after the coup, and after all the ugly stuff happened in April of 2002, he decided, well, maybe it's time for somewhat of a reboot, somewhat of a restart after all that. And that's when they put Rangel to the vice presidency. And then later on, it goes to a few other vice presidents. The last one ever was Nicolas Maduro, who was only there for a very short time. And Nicolas Maduro was there at a very opportune time for him, because then, Chavez forced to make a quick decision, decides that Maduro will be the next president of Venezuela, or if they choose to, by voting in the PSUV in April 2013 he didn't say that. What he said is that if he were to fall out of a position where he could effectively govern his country, and that position happened just a few months later, his condition rapidly decreased in the next couple months. Because he did that speech on December 8th, 2012. That was his last time ever on TV, his last speech ever. And that it was on a Saturday night, and it was very, it was a bit peculiar, he said. He even noted how peculiar it was. And then that was it. It was after that late Saturday night speech. It was 14 minutes or so. He was never seen on TV again. He would only have one other picture taken of him when he was recovering from cancer, and then he wasn't seen again until he died. Chavez's condition really rapidly decreased. He had the surgeries in December 2012, and then he had complications. He got a lung infection, and then he got really sick, and then he wasn't even able to make his swearing in because he was really sick and still recovering in Cuba. And then he got better in February 2013. He actually got good enough to travel back to Venezuela on February 18th, 2013. But then he had a picture taken around that time and before. Then he went on the flight, and then it wasn't heard too much about. But then he got another lung infection in late February 2013, and his condition rapidly dropped after that. He got very sick, and it was noted on March 4th, 2013, that he was in very bad condition. And March 5th, he died. And in the afternoon. But at least he made it back to his country. I guess that it was, one little victory of that is that he was able to return back to Caracas on February 18th, 2013. Literally only 15 days before he died, 2 weeks and a day before he died, was when he made that flight. He actually stayed even on social media, and he was on his Twitter, and that's when he had his picture taken. he had some media presence, all very close to when he died, and talking about the circumstances of his death is I don't think that he died completely of the cancer. I believe the cancer wasn't completely natural, and here's I think that it's very likely, and that's why I think the Venezuelan government decided to go forth with official investigation of the death, because he did live a pretty unhealthy lifestyle. But I think that just contributes to why him actually dying from cancer. But I think how it was inflicted on him. I think that he was possibly given it to him by a cancer weapon that the CIA has produced, and it's not a conspiracy theory. CIA and the KGB have been both noted to have the cancer weapon. The CIA has probably used the cancer weapon a few times, and cancer, it should be noted, doesn't work exactly the way that some people believe for it to work. It's not this mysterious thing where you just all of a sudden have abnormal cells. You give a lot of toxins, you give a lot of bacteria. I think there's a lot of studies now that have proven that cancer might be actually a result of a bacterial infection anyways. You could be given a lot of pathogens at one time, you could get inflicted with cancer, and that's what, and that he might have been at one time targeted with some kind of cancer weapon. And there's one very big revolt. There's one thing comes all back down to, because not only he got cancer, like 8 other leaders in South America all left the wing got cancer, including Lugo, who was removed from power, and Kirchner, who died from cancer as well. Well, he had a heart attack ultimately, but it probably was a result from the cancer. And Chavez, his official cause of death was a heart attack, but the cancer was ultimately what killed him and caused was ultimately him to go, for him to die. I think that Chavez there was definitely the reasoning why he would be given a cancer weapon is ultimately for all the reasons I've talked about: Banco de Sur, his breaking up the oligarchy and the oil, and all the natural resources that were nationalized. That was a reason. The natural resources were also all the other ones were nationalized as well, and I think that the natural resources being national, the other ones as well, be national. Where the reason why Chavez was targeted by a cancer weapon, if so. So there definitely was the motive. It definitely was a possibility. It was at the 2009 Summit of Americas, all of the leaders were present there. So who's not to say that somebody came around with a dart gun or something like that, or something that they could, more like something they could, shoot a little tiny thing in your toe or something, or wherever in your body, a little tiny speck of this stuff that's loaded with the pathogens, and gave it all to them, and that's why they all got cancer afterwards. It goes back to, there's always this urban legend that, and I think it's more like closer to a very possible reality that Bob Marley was assassinated. And Bob Marley, what happened was he got stabbed one time when he was going to a soccer game by his shoe, a little prick on and then he got at his toe, and then later he got cancer on that toe right after that. And because of his beliefs, he couldn't get it amputated. And he slowly succumbed to the cancer and died. And Chavez, who's not to say that they put something really powerful, and they said the cancer was originating somewhere in the prostate region. And but the thing that's bizarre about that is prostate cancer doesn't match up with that, because prostate cancer is not a violent cancer, and it's not a quick-acting cancer. He died at less than 2 years of getting the cancer, and he got way better treatment than most people could ever receive, with all the stuff, chemotherapy, and going to Cuba. I think he didn't focus enough on the natural cures that existed, and that's also probably didn't help. But he did do one natural help. Thing you can do when you have cancer is soak in iodine water, and the waters around Cuba are rich in iodine water. The best doctors in Cuba working on them, and ultimately still fell to it. So it was very odd saying that he fell to. But it's the KGB, the CIA both have the cancer weapon, and the CIA has probably used it many times, and I think they could have used it on him. It's very odd, the circumstances of Arafat's death, to this day, and they still have proof that that there was a possible Israeli assassination of Arafat. However, and a lot of people disregard it because they say just because of his advanced age, and people will and it's even weird with Chavez because he was only 58 years old, and he fell to this very quickly. Was not, didn't even get much of a fight, it seemed like. Anyways, if anyone wants to do a last-minute call-in, this is your last chance, 718-717-8296, 718-717-8296. It's nearing towards the end of the show here, and I'll just wrap it up, with saying this, Chavez, I really hope that all the people in the alternative media and the people that call themselves truthers really realize what this guy did for South America, what he means to us Latin Americans, and what kind of unity he brought to us, and what kind of. And I hope I think that a very beautiful soul, a very beautiful mind, and I think to many of us, he was almost like an uncle, something like that, as he connected to us. We almost felt like family to many of us, and at the same time as being a common Joe, he was brilliant-minded. He was very smart. He had a very great leadership. He was the ultimate manager. And it's funny, I brought up a baseball analogy because, Chavez actually did a baseball analogy, but it was about Barack Obama. And, because he kind of described, his mistake of endorsing Barack Obama as this is, those pitchers that come up in their 20s or whatever, and people believe they're going to be such great pitchers, coming into the major leagues. And then ultimately, they end up becoming wild and don't have any command on their pitches. That's pretty much what Obama is. Is that ultimately he did. Is that he had all his expectations in him. But he ultimately did what all the other pitchers did on the staff. But in my opinion, what the better baseball analogy is that for the if there's the New World Order baseball team or whatever, Obama is a pitcher that came out that people thought would come out there and give up a home run to us, the truthers or whatever, people that are fighting against the New World Order, but ultimately was actually a very great pitcher, and that he only had been bluffing and wasn't a good pitcher, so we wouldn't prepare for him adequately. I think that another analogy you could go with that. I think Clinton is the safe one that they don't think is going to do anything. Challenge the New World Order agenda whatsoever, and they know for sure she's going to listen. She's part of the New World Order and will listen to what they want her to do. So they'll put her on the mound, and they know that she'll pitch at 98 miles an hour, whatever, a hard hitting and controlled few innings. But Trump is there; he could really do some damage to the entire world. But they're not sure if they could necessarily control it too much. So they're not really sure if they want to put in a wild pitcher that could miss quite a few important pitches, but at the same time can throw 108 miles an hour. Just some baseball analogies to throw in there. That's like that. I love baseball, actually. I play quite a bit. I played today baseball, actually, for about 2 hours. And I was love baseball. Right now we're in spring training and down here in Florida. I think that's another thing. He's another common background he came from. He also was an athlete. He's actually, it's kind of weird that fate kind of brought him to become Venezuelan president, because there was a high likelihood he was going to become a major league pitcher one day. But ultimately he fell to an injury when he was 17, and then the injury led to him joining the military academy. So if history would have went a little bit different way, maybe he wasn't injured. Who knows? He might have been recruited. He was he said I think his favorite teams were the New York Yankees, or no, not the New York Yankees. His favorite team was the San Francisco Giants. So maybe instead of seeing Hugo Chavez as president of Venezuela in the 90s, we'd be wrapping up his career of a illustrious pitching career, helping Barry Bonds win a couple World Series, which actually never did win a World Series on the Giants. Maybe a good better pitcher might be like Chavez, who could have been in the major leagues, would have brought the Giants a World Series in the 90s. But yeah, it's good that he got injured and ended up going the military route and then ended up becoming the president, because for South America, his legacy, his inspired the people. It was like a Che. It was Che had been gone for a long time, but now rejuvenated our spirit and brought the South Americans back to wanting to take back our continent from the foreign interests that had for a long time opposed the South Americans' will. But now South Americans are back, and they are now control the destiny and control the future of the country, unlike in the past where it was just a few oligarchs controlling the future of Venezuela and South America. And Colombia, I think, is soon to change. There's no guarantees on that, because I think Colombia and other countries are very oil rich. They're not going to easily let go of the United States, and the New World Order are not going to easily let go of the country. And they're not going to let go of the whole region. That's what it means. It would be Ecuador. It would be Venezuela. It would be Brazil. It would be Bolivia. And it would be Peru. I think I just named, well, besides Panama, and that's the one's missing. That would be all the countries of Gran Colombia, or Bolivar's whole country. And that's what somewhat Chavez was able to do, is at least make somewhat a abbreviated version of Gran Colombia, somewhat. And Gran Colombia actually was it had the name Colombia, but it was, I think capital was Caracas, actually. I think Colombia is named Colombia. Bolivia is named after, obviously, Bolivar. I think that, I think that part of Brazil even was controlled by, was helped liberated, part of Peru was partially liberated by Bolivar. His reach went far to efforts of liberating the continent from the Spanish conquistadors that had done years of mass murdering and of imperialism against the Venezuelan people, or the South American people. Now, Venezuela, years after Andres Perez, it's been 18 years since, actually Caldera, but it's still the legacy of Perez lived on with Caldera, and then finally when Caldera was replaced with Chavez, and Chavez led his country, Venezuela, to GDP increase. Which these are not indicators really for the happiness of the country, but I'm just saying even economically it looks good. GDP, inflation decreases. You had all across the board a better looking economy, and you see in these countries, abstract poverty was completely eliminated practically in Venezuela, and poverty significantly reduced. In Argentina, it was like 90% reduction of both stats. In Venezuela, 1 more million Venezuelans became literate, and now a few more percent are now literate, thanks to the Mission Boliviano, for literacy. And one of the most important things towards the freedom of people is the freedom to be able to educate themselves. Is by the government that doesn't want people to be free, well, they won't be educating. They are being empowering so many to read.
Running no return and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad, the comet that killed the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country. Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds him. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never